The isometric genre is home to some of the most creative games ever made, but they rarely get the spotlight they deserve. We're talking about worlds where the gameplay depth is directly tied to that unique vantage point, offering strategic layers you just can't get anywhere else. So if you're tired of playing the same things over and over, we've compiled some of the best underrated isometric experiences that you absolutely need to give a chance to right now. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Kicking off our list is Lost in Random: The Eternal Die, and honestly it's the perfect example of a game that got overlooked simply because it dared to be different from its predecessor. If you played the original Lost in Random, you know it was this slow, story-heavy action-adventure game with a gorgeous Tim Burton-esque art style. Well, the developers over at Stormteller Games looked at that foundation and decided to completely flip the script, turning this spin-off into a full-blown isometric roguelite. And because it wasn't the sequel people expected, I think a lot of folks just slept on it. But here's the thing, the moment you step into a combat encounter, you realize this shift in genre was a brilliant move. You play as Queen Alexandra, and you're not just mindlessly swinging a sword, you're weaving together a rhythm that feels incredibly tactile. You've got your standard arsenal, a sword, a hammer, a bow, and a lance, but the real star is your little die companion. You actually have to physically throw fortune at enemies, dealing damage based on the roll, but then you have to dash in and retrieve him before you can do it again. That act of retrieval forces you to constantly reposition, making you dance in and out of danger instead of just camping at a distance. On top of that, you're collecting relics that you slot into a grid, matching colors for stat boosts while also gaining their unique perks, which adds this layer of strategic depth between every room. It's that constant loop of risk and reward of managing your positioning and your build that hooks you. The game absolutely nails that just one more run feeling, even if the narrative takes a backseat to the gameplay. To be fair, some critics felt the story wasn't as strong as the original, but for my money, the combat loop more than makes up for it. It's a tighter, more focused experience that proves isometric action doesn't need a sprawling epic to be compelling. So if you skimmed past this because you weren't sure about the roguelike shift, do yourself a favor and roll the dice on it. Alright, coming in next, we have Sworn, and this is one of those games that I think got a bit lost in the noise. It is a co-op roguelite from Windwalk Games, published by Team 17, and it came out in 2025 to some solid reviews, but never really blew up the way it should have. So here's the deal. You are in Camelot, but it is not the Camelot you remember. King Arthur is corrupted, the knights are all bad guys now, and you have to fight your way through this dark fantasy world to set things straight. You play as one of several unlockable characters, each with their own weapons and play styles. Like, we have a monk that uses magic, a rook who is a tank, a vigilante that is kind of fast and sneaky, and the whole time you are collecting blessings from these Fey Lords, which are basically gods that give you cool powers like fire attacks, wind spells, etc. Basically, these will become your skills, and there are 100 of these things, so every run feels different. Now, the best part for me is that this game is 4-player co-op game. When you get a group together, the game just sings. You can combo your abilities, revive each other, and generally cause mayhem. The art style is also worth mentioning. It is inspired by Hellboy comics, so you get these thick black lines and dramatic shadows that make everything look really striking. Now, it is not perfect. The story is pretty thin, and if you are playing alone, it can feel a bit repetitive, but honestly, for the price and the amount of content, it is a steal. If you like roguelites and you have friends to play with, you owe it to yourself to check this out. Coming in next, we have Tactical Breach Wizards. Okay, so the name of this game alone tells you exactly what you are getting, and yet it still manages to surprise you at every turn. You lead a squad of renegade mages who also happen to be tactical specialists. Think SWAT team meetings, Dungeons and Dragons. The core loop is turn-based tactics, the kind where positioning and ability combos matter more than raw firepower. But here is the kicker. Every single ability is designed to be fun to use and even more fun to chain together. Your sniper can see the future, letting you guarantee hits. Your demolitions expert is a chain-smoking necromancer who can blow holes in walls, and the game encourages you to experiment wildly with these powers. You're constantly looking for synergies, like using a wind spell to blow an enemy into a sniper's line of fire or stacking lightning damage to chain through a whole room. The feedback is immediate and the satisfaction is real. Plus, the game has this brilliant feature where you can rewind any action. If a plan goes sideways, you can just pull back and try a different approach. It removes the frustration and leaves only the fun of solving the puzzle. The writing is sharp and genuinely funny, with characters that bounce off each other perfectly. It is one of those rare strategy games that respects your time and your intelligence, while making you feel like an absolute genius when a plan comes together. If you have ever bounced off tactics games because they felt too punishing, this is the one that will convert you.
They came for us. They invaded every part of our world. So, we did the only thing we could.
Coming in next, we have Gears Tactics. And this is a game I also feel like a lot of people wrote off because it wasn't a traditional shooter. I mean, you see Gears of War and you think about roadie running and active reloads, right? So when they announced a turn-based tactics game, it was easy to just shrug and move on. But that was a mistake because this thing absolutely captures the spirit of the franchise. You control a squad of Gears, and from the first firefight, it feels familiar. You're still hugging cover, flanking enemies, and using the Lancer, but now you're doing it with careful, deliberate moves. The genius is in the action economy. You get 3 actions per turn, and if you pull off a close-range execution, you get one of those actions back. So instead of playing it safe, you're constantly looking for opportunities to chain together kills, to push forward and tear through the locust lines. It makes the game feel aggressive and kinetic, which is exactly what a Gears game should feel like. The downside is that the campaign is padded with a lot of repetitive side missions, and you can really feel that grind in the later acts. But, you know, those main story missions, especially the colossal boss fights, are some of the most intense tactical encounters I've played. It's a fantastic spin-off that proves the formula works, and if you haven't tried it, you're missing out on a genuinely great strategy game.
I'm ready to sacrifice everything.
Next on the list, we have Batora Lost Haven. You know, sometimes it feels like the critics have played something different compared to what gamers are actually playing because, you know, that's kind of the vibe here. The reviews for this game were all over the place. Some people loved the combat, others hated the story, and the scores ended up somewhere in the middle. And honestly, after playing it, I get why, but I also think it's worth your time. You play as Avril, this teenager who gets cosmic powers from the sun and the moon, and the whole game is about balancing 2 sides of yourself. In combat, you're constantly swapping between a melee form with a fiery sword and a ranged form with psychic blasts. Enemies are color-coded, so you have to match your form to the enemy type to deal real damage. And when you switch back and forth, you build up this meter that heals you and boosts your attacks. It's this satisfying rhythm where you're always moving, always swapping, always thinking about what's coming next. Plus, your moral choices actually matter mechanically, not just for the story. Being good or bad unlocks different upgrade paths, so your playstyle literally reflects your personality. And also the music is this epic orchestral score from the guy who did Batman Arkham, which, you know, kind of feels way too fancy for a game this size. And sure, the story can be a little cringy sometimes, and Avril's dialogue might make you roll your eyes, but the developers clearly cared. They patched and improved the game based on alpha feedback, which is more than a lot of studios do. If you like isometric action with a twist, give Batora a shot. It's a hidden gem with real heart. So next up, let's talk about Kill Knight, because, you know, this is one of those games that I genuinely feel bad for sleeping on. The premise is simple. You are a dead knight in really cool armor, and you are stuck in hell fighting waves of demons. You know, light stuff. But, you know, one thing that I found unique in this game is how it handles combat. It is an isometric shooter, but it plays more like a rhythm game. You have your basic pistols, which have infinite ammo, and then a bigger weapon with limited ammo. To get more ammo for the big gun, you have to go in for melee kills, so right away the game is forcing you to be aggressive. It doesn't want you hiding in a corner. Then when you kill enemies, they drop these red gems. And picking them up makes you faster and does more damage, but it also fills up your wrath meter. And when that meter is full, you can hit a button and just explode, turning nearby enemies into health packs. So the whole game becomes this loop of shooting, dash in for a slice, grab the shiny things, blow up, then repeat. It is super intense, and honestly it feels amazing when you get into that flow. The developers, Playside, they really understood the assignment. They built a game where the better you play, the more powerful you feel, which is exactly what you want from an arcade-style experience. It flew under the radar for a lot of people because it came out in a packed October, but trust me, if you are a fan of twin-stick shooters or just want a game you can pick up for 10 minutes and feel like a god, this is it. It is challenging, it is stylish, and it absolutely deserves a spot in your library. All right, so next up is Ruiner, and honestly, this is one of those games that makes me question how we decide what's a hit. You've got a studio founded by veterans from The Witcher and Dying Light, a publisher in Devolver Digital who rarely misses, and a cyberpunk aesthetic that absolutely nails the grim, neon-soaked vibe. And yet it feels like nobody talked about it when it released, but the people who found it, well, they love it, and for good reason. From the moment you start, the game grabs you by the throat and never lets go. You're this masked killer in the city of Renkok, and the combat is all about speed and aggression. You've got this dash move that's incredibly tight, and you're constantly using it to weave through bullets and close the gap on enemies. The rhythm is addictive. You'll be swinging a pipe, picking up a shotgun, dashing behind cover, and then activating your shield or hacking an enemy's brain to fight for you. And here's the really cool part. You can respec your entire skill tree whenever you want. If you're stuck on a boss, you can pause, move all your points from one ability to another, and try a completely different approach mid-fight. That flexibility is a game changer. Plus, the soundtrack is this pounding mix of industrial and synthwave that just drives everything forward. Look, the story is a little thin, and the hub world feels like it could have used more time in the oven. But when you're in the zone, dashing and slashing and watching bodies fly, it's pure adrenaline. If you missed this one, you need to correct that mistake. Next on the list, we have Sector Unknown. You know, this one kind of came out of nowhere. It is a solo-developed isometric sci-fi RPG from a guy named at Creative Storm Entertainment, and honestly, it is way more polished than you would expect from a one-person team. You start as a prisoner on a transport ship, you escape in a pod, and you crash land on this desolate planet called Maku. That planet becomes your home base, your stronghold, the place you build up while you explore the rest of the sector. The game wears its inspirations on its sleeve. You've got Fallout 2, Knights of the Old Republic, Wasteland 3 all in the DNA, but the execution here feels fresh. The skill system is deep. We are talking 6 physical attributes, plus skills like engineering, computers, biology, finances, piloting, and then the social ones like intimidation and persuasion. Every conversation, every locked container, every quest has these skill checks built in, and here is the kicker. They ramp up hard. Like, early checks might need 10 skill points, but by the end, you are looking at checks of 90 or 100. So you cannot be a jack of all trades. You have to specialize. You have to build a party where each person handles 1 or 2 skills and maxes them out. It is that old school crunch that makes character building actually matter. Now, the combat is turn-based, but it flows quickly because the AI handles your companions unless, you want to micromanage every move. You are recruiting people across different planets, each with their own side quests, building up this rebellion against the Star Frontier Corporation that runs the sector like a dictatorship. It is dense, it is ambitious, and for a game that costs around $22, it delivers 15-20 hours of content easily. It flew under the radar because it is a solo project that dropped into early access without a massive marketing push, but the very positive reviews on Steam do not lie. This is the kind of hidden gem that makes lists like this worth putting together. Okay, so next up we have Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. Now, this 2010 release from Crystal Dynamics that represents one of the most misunderstood entries in the franchise's history. The knee-jerk reaction from fans was skepticism. An isometric Lara Croft game couldn't possibly capture the essence of tomb raiding. But this skepticism ignored the pedigree behind the project. Crystal Dynamics developed this using the same engine-powering Tomb Raider underworld. The isometric perspective wasn't a cost-cutting measure. It was a deliberate design choice that eliminated the series' persistent camera issues. The combat system underwent a radical transformation into something resembling a twin-stick shooter. You aim with the right analog stick, fire with the shoulder button, and strafe while maintaining offensive pressure. The arsenal includes unlimited dual pistols and spears alongside limited ammo weapons like machine guns and flamethrowers, forcing players to manage resources dynamically during encounters. Bomb mechanics add another layer, unlimited placement with remote detonation, useful for both crowd control and physics-based puzzle solving involving massive stone spheres. However, the game's most innovative aspect is its dual-mode design. Solo play offers one set of puzzles and challenges. Co-op play, featuring the Mayan warrior Totec, fundamentally restructures those same levels around interdependent mechanics. So basically, the puzzles transform entirely based on player count. And while the narrative depth is minimal and aiming sensitivity occasionally frustrates, the 2025 iOS port from Feral Interactive, met with critical acclaim, demonstrates the gameplay's enduring quality. It's a sophisticated action puzzle hybrid that deserved far more attention than it received. Now, next up, we have Hellclock, and okay, look, I know you're going to say that it's another roguelike game, right? And yeah, I totally get that. You've got a fair point, but hear me out because this one is different. This is from a Brazilian studio called Rogue Snail, and instead of Greek gods or generic fantasy, it is based on a real historical event, the War of Canudos, where the Brazilian army wiped out a whole settlement in the 1890s. So you will be playing as this dead guy fighting through purgatory to save his mentor's soul. Which, kind of edgy, right? But the gameplay is where it gets good. It is basically Path of Exile meets Hades. You have got this massive skill tree, dozens of relics to slot into a Tetris-style grid, and abilities that can turn you into an absolute monster. I had a run where I turned my character into an electric Beyblade just spinning through everything, and I could not stop laughing. Now, full disclosure, at launch the movement was a little janky. You had to stop to cast stuff, which in a game this fast is a problem, but the devs just dropped an update and, they completely reworked it. Full 360 movement, casting on the run, input buffering the whole package. It feels smooth now. Plus, they've also got a whole expansion coming this year. And the game also sits at 82 on Metacritic, which is insane for a smaller title. So yeah, maybe you have played 100 roguelites, but you have not played one set in 19th century Brazil with a ticking clock and a relic system that actually makes you think. So yeah, feel free to check it out. Alright, coming in next, let's talk about Menace. This is a new tactics game from the people who made Battle Brothers, and if you know that game, you know exactly what you are getting into. Pain, suffering, and really good tactical combat. You are in charge of a space marine force that gets stranded in a lawless system, and you have to recruit locals, manage your ship, and fight off everything from pirates to alien bugs. The thing that makes it click for me is the personality. Every squad leader you bring into battle has a name, a history, and they talk to each other. When they get suppressed, they panic. When a friend dies, they sound genuinely upset. It makes you care about these little digital sprites in a way most games don't bother with, and the combat is deep without being overwhelming. You have to think about cover, about which way a tank is facing, about whether to use a rocket now or save it for the next wave. It feels like playing a tabletop war game, but without needing a rule book the size of a dictionary. Now, this game just came out earlier this month of February, and it's in early access, and while the hardcore strategy community is buzzing, the average gamer has probably never heard of it. That is a shame, because this has the potential to be one of the greats. If you have a Steam account and a few hours to lose, do yourself a favor and check it out. Alright, coming in next is The Ascent, and this is one of the prettiest isometric games you'll ever see. This is essentially like Diablo 4, but in full-on cyberpunk mode, and to be fair, the story isn't bad at all. Instead of playing the lesser criminal loser like you do 99% of the time in other cyberpunk fiction, here you're just an indentured servant to the biggest corporation in the world, one that runs everything in a massive cyberpunk city. The biggest mega corporation of all, and it has suddenly collapsed for reasons we do not understand. When your giant, faceless moneyman overlord suddenly disappears, when accounting stops, the galaxy basically goes to freaking war, and you're stuck right in the middle of the chaos because, man, The Ascent is chaos, one of the biggest cyberpunk worlds. It just really kicks ass. The visuals are unbelievable for a game like this. It's a bleeding-edge game that plays just as well as it looks, but, not everything about The Ascent works. The top-down view can kind of spoil some of the more cinematic bits, and the gun balancing sometimes feels like it is all over the place, but when it works, it really works. This is a game with some high highs and absolutely worth playing with some friends.
Lend an ear to this tale of treachery. Set sail for vengeance. Face the unknown.
Coming in next, we have Rogue Waters, and this one comes from Ice Code Games, the same folks who made Hard West 2. You play as Captain Cutter, a pirate who gets betrayed by his old captain, left for dead with a cursed eye, and then wakes up a decade later to find out he is immortal. So naturally, you go on a revenge trip. But the reason this game hooked me is the combat. It is turn-based tactical stuff, but instead of the usual percentage-based hit chances that always seem to screw you over, they did something smarter. Every melee attack pushes the target backward. If they hit an obstacle, they take extra damage. If they hit another enemy, that enemy takes damage too. If they have nowhere to go, they just die instantly. So suddenly, you are not just trading blows, you are setting up chain reactions like a pool shot. You are positioning your crew to shove guys into spikes, off the ship, or into each other. It feels tactical without feeling like homework, and you get an undo button, so if you mess up a move, you can just rewind and try something else. That alone makes it more approachable than most games in the genre. Plus, you have sea monsters. Free the Kraken from captivity, and it will crush your enemies during fights. Free the mermaid, and she disrupts their formations. There is even a giant snail that drops a spiked obstacle on the deck. It is weird, it is creative, and it is exactly the kind of mid-budget gem that deserves more eyes on it.
Where'd they go? Got the trail. Stay on. Dispatch! Suspect has been located.
10-4.
You're such a clever dog.
Alright, so next up is The Precinct, and I'm here to tell you that if you missed this when it dropped last year, you made a mistake. Fallen Tree Games, the studio behind American Fugitive, took the classic top-down Grand Theft Auto formula and flipped it completely. You're not the criminal in this game. You're a rookie cop working the beat in Averno City, a rain-soaked neon noir nightmare straight out of an 80s crime flick, and you're trying to solve your father's murder. And here's what makes this game special. It actually cares about how you do your job. Every arrest matters. You check IDs, you search for contraband, you apply the correct charges, you sometimes crew it up and use lethal force when you shouldn't, and even book someone for the wrong crime. This kind of things happen. And you know, it forces you to slow down and makes you think, which is kind of a rare thing in a sandbox game. But don't worry, because the action delivers. When a chase starts, you're in it. High-speed pursuits through destructible environments, calling in roadblocks and spike strips, coordinating with helicopter backup while the synthwave hits hard. And, you know, the atmosphere is soaked in period detail that I personally love. And yes, sometimes it gets repetitive. Yes, the story also kind of feels disconnected. But look at the numbers. Lots of players love this game with almost 5-star rating on Steam. Now, critics were lukewarm, but who cares? Because, you know, most of the gamers who played this game loved it. So if you want something fresh in the sandbox genre, you need to check this out. You won't regret it. Okay, so next up we have Redacted. So remember the Callisto Protocol, the spiritual successor to Dead Space that looked amazing but had some mixed reviews? Well, the same developers made this little isometric roguelike set in that same prison, and honestly it might actually be better than the original game. You play as a guard trying to get to the last escape pod, but you are competing against other survivors. And these aren't just generic enemies, they are characters with names and backstories. You have this one guy, a violent gangster, who will literally challenge you to a one-on-one fight in the middle of a run. It keeps you on your toes. The combat is fast and fluid. You are dashing, shooting, and meleeing your way through rooms of infected inmates, and it just feels good in your hands. The developers said they really focused on making the controls responsive, and you can tell, but my favorite mechanic is the corpse fights. Every time you die, your ghost stays in the prison with all the gear you had, and on your next run, you have to fight that ghost to get a permanent upgrade. I mean, it is such a smart way to make death meaningful without being punishing, right? Now, this game came out in 2024, and, you know, it just kind of came and went. I think the weird title and the fact that it is a spin-off hurt it, but either way, if you like Hades or Children of Morta, you owe it to yourself to check this out. It is chaotic, it is stylish, and it is way better than it has any right to be. Coming in next, we have Disciples Domination, and this one picks up 15 years after the last game, Liberation. You are back as Queen Aviana, and spoiler alert, being queen is not going great. She spent the last decade and a half making some pretty questionable decisions, the factions are at each other's throats, and now some new supernatural threat is bubbling up to make everything worse. So you have to step in and clean up the mess. The game throws you into this isometric world where you are riding around on horseback, exploring, talking to people, and managing your capital city of Ilion between battles. But, you know, what I love about this setup is the throne mechanic. You can fast travel back to court whenever you want, and suddenly you are dealing with faction reputation, upgrading buildings, and deciding who gets what resources. It makes you feel like an actual ruler, not just a general. Now the combat is turn-based on a grid, and they added this really smart feature where before a fight, the game straight up tells you which units will be strong or weak against the enemies you are facing. No more guessing or reloading saves because you brought the wrong squad. It is accessible without feeling dumbed down. That said, the whole experience clocks in around 40 hours, and it can get a bit repetitive if you try to mainline it in one sitting. It is the kind of game you play in chunks, letting it breathe between other titles. And look, the writing is a little hit or miss. Some of the dialogue sounds way too modern for a dark fantasy world, and the voice acting can feel forced at times, but the overall story is solid enough to keep you pushing forward. This game also came out this month, and it is sitting around a 73 on Metacritic, which feels about right. It is not rewriting the rulebook, but if you want a competent, meaty strategy RPG that respects your time, this one is worth a look. Next on the list, we have Darksiders Genesis. So if you're one of the fans who dismissed this because it's not a third-person action game, then you're making a mistake. When this was announced, the internet took one look at the isometric camera and decided it wasn't real Darksiders. But here's what you missed. The developer is made up of the original Vigil Games veterans who created the first two games. So these aren't outsiders, they're the architects of this universe, and what they built here is a genuine evolution of the formula. The core innovation is the dual character system. You swap between Strife and War on the fly, and they are fundamentally different. Strife is a twin-stick shooter nightmare, flipping through the air, hovering while he fires his pistols, controlling entire crowds from range, while War is the opposite. He is slow, deliberate, and absolutely devastating up close. That dynamic keeps combat fresh for like the entire campaign, and the creature core progression system lets you customize both characters with stat bonuses and passive abilities slotted into a grid, giving you real control over your build. Now, the platforming can be floaty, and yes, sometimes the enemy variety runs thin, but the co-op mode saves it. Playing through with a friend, each controlling one horseman, turns this into one of the best couch co-op experiences in years. If you haven't checked this out yet, you definitely have to give this one a try.
This cursed monastery devours the soul. We are five, broken, tormented, and hunted by shadows both real and imagined.
Coming in next, we have The Stone of Madness. Look, this is one of those games that I think deserves way more love than it got. It came out early last year from the Game Kitchen, the folks behind Blasphemous, and it is a total departure from their usual style. I mean, instead of a 2D action game, this is an isometric stealth tactics game set in this massive old monastery in 18th century Spain. You control 5 prisoners who are all trying to escape, and they each have their own strengths and weaknesses. There's the monk with a lamp, the strong guy who can move heavy stuff, the old witch lady, the agile woman who can knock people out, and a little kid who can fit through small spaces. The twist is that they all have phobias, so the strong guy is afraid of the dark, the fighter lady is afraid of fire, the monk cannot handle dead bodies. Kind of chaotic, right? So if you put them in situations that trigger these fears, their sanity starts dropping. Let it hit 0, and they develop permanent new problems like claustrophobia or paranoia. You can only bring 3 characters out each day, so you are constantly playing this puzzle of who to take where. And because the game only saves at the end of each day, you cannot just reload when someone loses their mind. You have to roll with it. The art style is gorgeous, all hand-painted and inspired by the Spanish painter Goya. The music is great too, but it is hard, like really hard, and some people found the controls frustrating. Still, if you are into stealth games and want something with a unique setting and real emotional weight, give this one a shot. So next up, we have Victor Vran. So if you're an ARPG veteran, this is the one that's going to surprise you. Developed by Hemimont Games, it's a 2015 release that completely ditches the traditional class system for something far more dynamic. You aren't grinding to unlock a specific skill tree, you're grinding to find new weapons, and every weapon type, whether it's a sword, a hammer, or a mortar, fundamentally changes your moveset and how you approach a pack of demons. This creates a combat loop based on adaptation rather than rote memorization, but here's the kicker. The game demands actual mechanical skill. Because you have a dodge roll and a jump, positioning isn't just a suggestion, it's a requirement. You're not just standing there trading blows, you're weaving through attacks, leaping over ground hazards, and looking for openings. There's even a hex system that lets you voluntarily crank up the difficulty on an area for better loot, essentially letting you set your own challenge level. And if that wasn't enough to sell you, the Overkill Edition includes the Motorhead Through the Ages DLC, where you fight demons in a twisted World War II setting while wielding a guitar that shoots sound waves. It's bizarre, it's polished, and it's a testament to how creative this genre can be when it doesn't take itself too seriously.
I'm a game deck. I solve crimes in virtual worlds. Like a murder over a game clan dispute.
And next up, let's talk about Game Deck. This is another kind of a lower budget isometric RPG in the vein of Disco Elysium with an intriguing premise, but maybe some flaws in its execution. But that's not to say the game's not worth your time. Quite the opposite, in fact. It's an interesting, flawed game. Hardly got noticed when it came out. Sometimes an imperfect game is a little bit more interesting than a perfect one. And this one certainly qualifies. It has got to be my favorite kind of jank, though. Lofty ambitions, but you can tell the devs were saddled with limited resources. The big thing with Game Deck is the way it integrates a meta experience of playing video games with its world. It's one of the first cyberpunk stories that actually focuses on the internet or its natural evolution, a kind of MMORPG, metaverse, whatever. It's a neat idea that doesn't quite tell a story to its full potential. But what is here is interesting enough. It's intriguing. It's something that probably should have been part of a bigger game to really work. And it's one of those games where you can definitely feel the budgetary struggles of its dev team, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game. They clearly put everything they had into the game. It's actually packed with fairly robust gameplay systems. It's a true RPG in every sense. Player choices everywhere along with a robust character growth system. It's not one of the better isometric RPGs on this list, but it's certainly one of the most interesting. And it's also flawed in a way that makes it a little bit more interesting. All right, next up is Kill Squad. So this one comes from the Spanish studio Novarama, which fully released the game back in 2021 after a lengthy early access period. Now this is a game that a lot of people dismissed because it launched into a crowded market, but honestly it does something really unique with the isometric formula. For one thing, it blends a twin-stick shooter with a hack and slash, but then it layers in a MOBA-style progression system. So when you drop onto a planet, you start every mission at level 1. You're running and gunning, clearing out alien hordes, and as you kill stuff, you level up mid-mission and unlock your abilities in real time. It creates this great rhythm where the first few minutes are tense and scrappy, but by the time you reach the boss, you're fully kitted out and unleashing hell. Plus, the whole vector system means your power isn't just about your level. It's about the gear you've bought between missions. You're constantly balancing your loadout to meet the contract requirements, which adds a strategic layer before you even fire a shot. It's a game that demands you actually aim and dodge, not just click on enemies, and that skill-based combat is why it stands out. It's a hidden gem for anyone who loves sci-fi and wants their isometric action to feel a bit more like a modern shooter. And finally, we have Solasta, Crown of the Magister. If you call yourself a fan of tactical RPGs and you haven't played this 2021 gem from Tactical Adventures, you are missing out on the purest D&D 5th edition combat experience available on PC. Forget the flashy cinematics and the Hollywood voice acting. This game is about the mechanics. You create a full party of 4 adventurers, choosing from a huge array of races and classes, and then you drop them into scenarios that demand you actually understand the rules. The environment is fully interactive, so that grease spell you cast can cause enemies to slip and fall, giving you a massive advantage. The game even includes a DM mode of sorts with its Dungeon Maker, letting you create and share your own adventures. Yes, the graphics are dated and the facial animations are stiff. That's the trade-off for the depth. But the combat, it's rock solid. The Lost Valley DLC adds a whole new campaign with a more open-ended, faction-based structure that fixes the linearity complaints of the main story. This is a game that rewards system mastery and clever thinking. Do not sleep on it.